Hello, my name is Marleen Morris, and I am the co-director of the Community Development Institute and an adjunct professor of geography at the University of Northern British Columbia. I am very pleased to be here today at the annual Canadian Rural Revitalization Foundation Conference. I would like to begin by acknowledging that here in Prince George, we are on the traditional territory of the Lheidli, and that in this virtual presentation with people from across Canada, I would like to take a moment to recognize and acknowledge all of the traditional territories on which we are virtually gathered. My presentation today is entitled Coming Together and How That Changed Us, the development of a social and economic development framework for the city of Fort St. John. Fort St. John is located in northeast British Columbia. Most people know it as the oil and gas capital of the province, but the reality of Fort St. John is much more nuanced and complex. The city of Fort St. John has a lot to offer, a wide range of civic facilities and programs, plenty of employment opportunities, strong community and social organizations, and people who care about and contribute to their community. In 2017, the City of Fort St. John entered into a 4-year partnership with the Community Development Institute. The goal of this partnership was to understand the trends and trajectories that are shaping the future of Fort St. John, and engage and mobilize organizations and citizens to work together to seize opportunities, address challenges, and navigate change. In doing so, we would be working together to enhance quality of life in the community and the resiliency of the people, the organizations, and the community of Fort St. John. That work culminated in energizing our future, the social and economic development framework for Fort St. John. The purpose of the framework is to provide guidance, focus, and the tools to build a strong foundation that will support the future social and economic development of Fort St. John. The framework recognizes that it will take the whole community working together to realize its vision and future potential. It recognizes that it needs to set the stage for all facets of the community to embark on a journey together, to seize opportunity, address challenges, and navigate change, and to help guide the city of Fort St. John and the community as a whole in enhancing quality of life and strengthening the economy in Fort St. John, both now and into the future. This framework is not intended to be another report that simply sits on a shelf. It was intended to be a living document that is taken up by the whole community. Even before the report was formally launched, we already made great strides in this area. Organizations and people were already working together to make the actions in this document a reality. I would like to begin by giving you a quick overview of my presentation. This presentation is part of the conference stream on building bridges between public, private, and civil society sectors. In keeping with that topic, I want to focus on the process that we use to engage the community and develop Energizing Our Future, the social and economic development framework for Fort St. John. I will highlight 4 aspects of the process we used: understanding and setting the context for our work, establishing the structure for the process, creating common understanding through collecting and using information and research to further our work in building bridges, and lastly, identifying and supporting leaders. It is important to highlight that in our process, as in any work to build bridges and enhance collaboration, the focus in these areas must be intentional. And then I will close with a summary. Before we begin, here are a few fast facts about the project. We engaged over 1,600 people and 75 organizations. We hosted and facilitated more than 50 focus groups and 40 dialogue sessions, and we produced 31 reports. But most rewarding was the fact that this work created change. It changed policies and directions in organizations across all three sectors. Some were a surprise. For example, Marleen Energy rewrote the job description for its Special Project Manager. The new position is called Special Projects and Community Development Manager to reflect a new focus and responsibilities in this area. So now back to the presentation outline. Setting the context for our work in Fort St. John was possibly the most important step in the whole process. Setting the context correctly went a long way in establishing the legitimacy of the process. It also gave us credibility. We set the context for our work by establishing 4 principles. First, the process had to be community-owned and led. We know that lasting change happens when people come together to create change. Grassroots, ground-up, community-based change. And that's what we wanted to initiate and support. I think it is likely that we have all been involved in a process that is led by government. Too often, it turns into an exercise where people just use the process to tell the government what to do. Or it turns into a process in which the government tries to say yay or nay to community initiatives that they really have no jurisdiction over. We did not want either of these outcomes. This principle helped our credibility in the community. Second, we wanted a process that resulted in directions and actions that would bring the community together, to work together to make it happen. We know that so many of the issues communities face today cannot be solved or addressed by one organization or sector working in isolation. So we intentionally wanted to look at identifying areas for action that would bring organizations and sectors together. We wanted to create a culture of working together so that this culture would endure into the future. When we started, some of the civil society organizations were concerned that we were trying to interfere in their programming. This principle helped establish comfort and credibility with those organizations. Third, we knew that it would be critical for the framework and the actions to be supportive of and aligned with the city's vision, strategies, and plans. The city was taking a big risk, giving us this project and then taking a back seat. We wanted to assure them that what we were doing would fit with and further where they wanted to go. This was not hard because where they wanted to go was good. Their vision for Fort St. John was a flourishing city where nature lives, businesses prosper, families are active, and diversity is celebrated. So this helped with credibility with the city. Lastly, we wanted to ensure that the CDI was embedded in the community. We wanted to have staff who lived there, staff who the residents of Fort St. John and the people we were working with in the process would see in the grocery store, would pass on a walking trail, or would bump into at an event. In a community that has a love-hate relationship with fly-in, fly-out workers, we did not want to be fly-in, fly-out researchers. Being embedded was a gift, and it really worked to build relationships and establish credibility with all groups. Before we could even begin to develop a project plan, we needed to understand the dynamics and structure of the community. We needed to know who the leaders were, what networks existed, how the community communicated, and what the issues were. These insights were critical to building bridges between public, private, and civil society sectors. So we spent the first several months just getting to know the community, going for coffee or lunch with the formal leaders and influencers, going to meetings of various groups and organizations, going to community events, figuring out who was there and who was not, listening for insights about the history of the community, not the stuff that you could read in books or on websites, but the history of relationships, like why, for example, the relationship between the arts and culture community and the city was so fractured. And we listened and watched for the change agents, the informal leaders and the influencers, people who might not be in the spotlight today, but who were showing that they could make things happen. Some of the people we identified were just young. Some were new to the community. And one was a long-term resident who hadn't really been listened to until just recently. And once we understood all of this, we designed a project structure and plan that engaged a broad and inclusive cross-section of the community from the public, private, and civil society sectors. Bringing people and sectors together was done very carefully, using the insight we had gained from the time we spent getting to know the community. Each session was carefully designed. We wanted to ensure that the engagement was positive and that the dialogue was rich. We wanted to create respectful, real, and open dialogue. Yes, we included the formal leadership, informal leaders, change agents, but we also included people who had never been to a public meeting before. We made certain to include people who could challenge, contemplate, and change. Together, we all worked to create common understanding of the community. People talked and, more importantly, people listened. I mean, really listened. Through this, people learned things about their community and the culture of the community that they never knew. We found that we needed to create a safe space, not only for the people who spoke their truth, but also for those who listened. The key values guiding this dialogue were that they were to be non-judgmental, respectful, open, and safe, and that we wouldn't be ashamed or worried about emotion. Emotion was just fine. As you can imagine, people from the public, private, and civil society sectors often have very different ways of looking at the world or analyzing specific situations. They operate differently. They use different information for decision making, and they put different value on that information. They can be quite foreign to one another. Bridging these differences is important. Creating common understanding is important. Common understanding enabled our group to move forward based on the information they could all agree on. For this project, we created common understanding by collecting and using both quantitative and qualitative information and data. The first thing we did was to put together a community profile using census data. This was an eye-opener for many. There were a couple of key pieces of information that really got people talking. For example, that immigrants to the community increased from 5 to 11% of the population between 2011 and 2016. That the percentage of the population that identified as a visible minority increased from 5% to 12% in the same time frame. And that while Fort St. John sees itself as a young, family-oriented community, the fastest growing segment of the population are seniors. This got people realizing that they may not know their community as well as they thought they did. That opened them up to qualitative discussion and hearing about other issues, such as the lack of welcome in the community and in the workplace felt by new immigrants to the community, or the impact of a community narrative and the unspoken pressure for young men to leave high school before graduating and to go into the oil patch, only to be in a career that was more and more susceptible to boom and bust cycles. Or the impact of a high rate of low adult literacy. And finally, importantly, very importantly, the blind spot in the community toward First Nations, their treaty rights, their history, their culture, and their current reality. When these issues and others like them were raised and discussed, all three sectors realized that there was lots of common ground for common action. That is when people really started thinking and planning together. That is when things began to happen. We really began to see the three sectors coming together to transform the community and enhance quality of life and economic potential. Leadership is important in any community-based work and very important in building bridges between public, private, and the civil society sector. In a collaborative project, no one has any formal authority. Collaborative leaders must be able to inspire commitment and action through vision. Generally speaking, a command and control approach based on hierarchy does not work in a collaborative project. So, through the process, collaborative leadership was encouraged, nurtured, and supported. Leaders emerged from all three sectors. People worked together more as peers. Leadership was sometimes fluid between people, depending on the issue. There was no need to define these relationships in writing. It just happened. It was emergent. For the facilitator, in this case the CDI, that meant acting as a convener, assimilating, analyzing, and reflecting back to the group. And sometimes it meant being a translator between the sectors and their different ways of seeing and understanding. It was not our role to bend things to someone else's agenda. So, in summary, our project in Fort St. John illustrated the power of collaboration between the public, private, and civil society sectors. When they work together, things happen. To get there, we focused on 4 key factors: setting the context for the project so that it enhanced the legitimacy and credibility of the process in all 3 sectors, understanding the structure of the community, its culture, leadership, and networks, and then, and only then, designing the process for the project, creating common understanding about the community through gathering qualitative and quantitative data and nurturing inclusive dialogue, and lastly, supporting and nurturing collaborative leadership. That is leadership that inspires action and commitment through vision. Through this process, the community addressed some very challenging issues. It was very difficult work, but caring, passionate people can do a lot together, and they did. And Fort St. John is a better place for their work. Thank you for this opportunity to make this presentation to the SURF conference 2021. I was absolutely delighted to be invited to be here. If any of you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. I would welcome hearing from you, and I wish you all the very best for the rest of the conference. Take good care.